Hello, welcome to the show. In this episode, I'm going to share stories of moms that I've interviewed over the years who've taken their trauma, their heartache, and suffering and turned them into a meaningful purpose to help others. Now, some of these stories are deeply emotional and might trigger strong feelings, but my prayer is that by hearing how these moms have overcome trauma, you'll see that it didn't stop their life story. In fact, they use their suffering to help others on similar journeys, transforming it into a powerful purpose. So hopefully these stories will show you that even in heartache and pain, God can turn it around. I hope this episode blesses you. Let's get into it. Welcome to Momatize Your Passion, a place for moms with big dreams and an eagerness to turn them into a thriving reality. Whether you're a mother looking to monetize your talents, transition from a stagnant job, or explore a fun side hustle, you're in the right place. I'm Caroline, wife, mother, and the visionary behind Tinseltown Mom, a platform dedicated to helping moms to embrace and pursue their God-given dreams. After interviewing nearly 100 celebrities for my platform, one common theme stands out in their success stories: passion. As a former actress, current writer, celebrity blogger, and certified life coach, passion has always been at the core of my journey. And through it all, I've discovered the power of honing our gifts, learning from our past, and using our experiences to uplift others. Join me on the show as I explore stories of celebrity moms and successful mompreneurs, uncovering the roadmap to their accomplishments. I'll also be sharing business and marketing tips to guide you towards tangible ideas for making money. Here, my hope is that you'll find inspiration from God, encouragement, and practical insights to momatize your passion. By the way, I will have the full episode of each clip in the show notes if you want to come back and listen to it later. So the first person I want to highlight is Kristen Jensen. And although this trauma did not happen to her directly, it's too important not to mention. On episode 7, Kristen spoke about how her friend's son was molesting his siblings. She wanted to help, but could find no suitable resources. So she went on a mission to try to figure out why this happened and discovered it was related to pornography. So Kristen went on to write a book, a best-selling book, Good Pictures, Bad Pictures. She also started an organization called Protect Young Minds that protects kids and teens against the devastating effects of pornography. It was actually a 2-part episode, number 7 and number 8. Take a listen.
Well, I've heard of children as young as 7 and 8 getting professional counseling because they couldn't stop looking at pornography. I have talked to men who have coaching businesses who coach men, who are constantly contacted by young kids who say, I can't stop looking at this. Can you help me? And, he says, you need to talk to your parents. And he says, they'll hang up. He says, I can't talk to my parents. Well, because we haven't talked to them first, right?
Yeah.
And so I just got an email the other day, I think yesterday, from a pastor who said, I have a mom in my congregation, single mom, whose 9 and 12-year-old are both addicted to pornography. What can we, do you have any resources?
Wow.
I mean, this is a silent epidemic. It is everywhere the internet goes.
Yeah.
And so many parents do not know. I know a man who told me about how he was shown pornography by his older cousins when he was 7. And he says, and it was just like magazines, right?
Yeah.
And he said, but once he says that just turned something on. And he says, I just felt like this compulsion to look for more. And from that day on, he just looked for more. And, it started a porn addiction. And, to this day, his mother never knows about it. His mother doesn't know about it. That's all led to writing Good Pictures, Bad Pictures. I thought it was going to take a couple of weeks in the summer, but it ended up taking 3 years to write it and to publish it. And but I tested on so many parents, so many different iterations of versions, so that it was so that it flowed and it gave just the right amount of information. And basically, the book just shows a mother and a father. It portrays them talking and having these conversations with their children, especially this one child in the book. And so it serves as a script, and parents can read the book to their child. They can, read the book to themselves and then just use it as a guide. However you feel comfortable. It's very easy and comfortable.
On episode number 10, I spoke with Emily Lynn Paulson, a beloved wife and mom of 5 who hid her struggles with alcoholism from her family and friends. It wasn't until she hit her breaking point that she finally admitted that she was an alcoholic. She wrote about it in her memoir, and now she's helping thousands. Take a listen.
But it started small. It started with a glass of wine, maybe while I was making dinner, or while I was giving the kids a bath. And then all of a sudden that wine glass would get emptied, and then it would be 2. And it did slowly progress to a bottle at night. And by the time, I stopped drinking, sometimes it could be 2. If I had to open another one, I would sure be finishing it. And then I was able to rationalize on the weekends, maybe in the morning, if there was still some champagne left over, oh, well, I'll have a mimosa. That's a breakfast treat, right? Mm-hmm. I'm not drinking in the morning. That's something you're supposed to do. And there were times then where I was home and, maybe the kids were napping and, the older kids were at school, that I thought, oh, there's a beer in the fridge. Oh, that sounds good. I found myself wanting it more. Mm. So again, it was something that started small and just slowly increased. And again, it's that rebound effect where if I was wanting that 5 p.m. glass of wine because of anxiety or whatever, that in the morning, that anxiety had just tripled.
Right.
Because I wasn't actually dealing with any of the reasons that I drank.
No,
ever.
Right.
And then I was, one thing too, that I started noticing, or I guess, in hindsight, looking back, that I was doing is if I would meet a friend out for happy hour, I would have a drink before I left and I would have a drink when I came back, because I started becoming aware that I was drinking more than the people around me. And I also started hanging out with people who drank more so that I didn't look like I had such a problem. And it became really an obsession for me. If I had a book club or whatever it was around my house, there was always alcohol involved, but I would be very aware of how much other people were drinking, or if they left a glass and it was still half full. I couldn't even comprehend that. Like, why would you leave that glass half full? And so it became so much work in my brain to think about drinking. Do I have a bottle at home? It just became an absolute obsession. Professional recovery coaching is really kind of the bridge between, say if someone goes to treatment and they come out and they're really looking for someone to help keep them on the right path. And it's also for people who don't necessarily feel like they fit in the programs, the AA, or they don't feel like they're a rock bottom drunk. They're just questioning their relationship with alcohol. I work with women on all ends of the spectrum, and it's really about, it's not about going back. It's not therapy. It's not about going back in your history and unraveling things. It's really about just making small goals to, get to the next level and really unlocking the part of yourself that is able to meet these goals yourself. And so it's kind of like a little, cheerleader in your corner.
All right. So on episode number 28, I spoke with Rebecca Bender. So in her late teens as a single mom, Rebecca thought she found her happy ending when she moved to Las Vegas with her boyfriend. But when he became her pimp at the age of 19, things quickly turned for the worst. She was abused, addicted to drugs, and forced into sex trafficking for almost 6 years before finally finding her way of escape. Rebecca is now equipping law enforcement, community leaders, professionals, and families so they can help identify those affected by human trafficking. Take a listen to the clip.
And instead of taking me to a nightclub, he took me to an escort service. It was on a dead-end street, and he told me that he'd spent a lot of money to get me there, and that was money he was using for his job. And I remember feeling really embarrassed that I didn't know how much it cost to move. I felt like this young girl with this older guy that had this promising career that I was, putting a wrench in, so to speak. And he told me that I needed to get the money back and that I should go into the escort service and sign up. And I remember saying, escort sounds like prostitution. No way. And he said, no, this is how it works in Vegas. This is how they send dancers to those really nice suites. And, you've already been in the club. Don't act like you haven't been in like a bathing suit at the pool. It's not going to be that big of a deal. And I thought, well, he's in the entertainment industry. He knows better than I do. Maybe I can trust him. I love him. He loves me. So you kind of justify. And even still, I was like, yeah, I don't know. Like escort, though, really sounds like prostitution. I'm not that naive. I'm from a small town. I'm not that naive.
Yeah.
And that's when he slapped me across the face. And he said, you're going to go in that room and you're going to get my money back. And I had all the emotions of a young girl being hit for the first time. And then I also had this moment where I thought, I don't know where my baby is. I don't know my address by heart. I didn't write it down. I didn't send it home to my mom. Like, even if I wanted to jump out right now, how would I get back to my daughter?
Right.
And so I pushed down those fears and I complied, and I just hoped it would be better tomorrow and that I could trust him and then it would just be dancing and that things would be better tomorrow was just what I kept saying. And I went in that room and signed up thinking, I just need to get home to my baby. Things will be better tomorrow. I can trust him. You kind of push down those pricks in your conscience and move forward. We want people to know there is hope and there is joy in fighting for cultural change and to making a difference in your country and community and state. And also there's joy in helping people find hope after exploitation. It's nothing better than seeing a survivor get her first job, get out, get her kids back, get into her first apartment. That's why we do it.
So in episode number 43, I spoke with Angela Rose. At the age of 17, Angela was abducted at knife point outside a Chicago shopping mall by a repeat sex offender on parole for murder. Tragically, she was sexually assaulted. On this episode, she talks about her healing journey and how she's now helping other sexual assault victims. Take a listen.
Well, I think really for me to turn my anger into activism personally was extremely healing for me. Being able as a teenager to help for, supporting this type of legislation, this legislative change, to think that I was hopefully going to use my story and experience to help protect other people. I started speaking out. I use, as I mentioned in the beginning of this interview, I was a lot, I did a lot of theater growing up. And so I was able to fall on that background and start public speaking, a very short time after I was kidnapped, because I wanted other people to realize that they weren't alone. And I had an incredible support network from my family that so many people, unfortunately, don't have. My grandmother was my best friend, and she called me and said, Angela, I know this was hard for you, but this happened to you for a reason, and you have to fight to try and keep him in prison. And so, I kind of took on the role of advocate or activist, just a few short weeks after this happened to me. And the first media interview I ever did was just the back of my head. I wasn't ready to show my face yet, because it is, there is a lot of perceived shame that we are trying to eliminate. But I made a plea for other young women to come forward. I said, I know since he's been out on parole that I'm not the only girl that he's done this to. I just felt that. And 4 other girls came forward. And so I just, for me, I wanted to use my story and my experience to help other people, to help prevent it, to help just help in general. And so I think that was my first step in healing, was turning that anger into activism. And then for me, I didn't find a therapist until years and years later. And my family were kind of, pick yourself up by your bootstraps. Like we weren't, I don't think I come from an Italian background. It's, and so I never really wanted to seek help when I was younger, because I didn't want to be seen as quote unquote weak. And what I realized is that it's a huge sign of strength to decide to want to heal.
On episode number 46, I spoke with Mary Beth Chapman, who is the wife of Grammy award-winning artist Steven Curtis Chapman. So in 2008, their family experienced the unimaginable when their 5-year-old daughter was accidentally run over by her older brother in his SUV. Tragically, she passed away. And as you can imagine, the family was devastated on so many levels. Despite this tragedy, Mary Beth and her family found hope and healing. And Mary Beth even wrote about it in her book, Choosing to See. Take a listen to the clip.
So, a year later, I think Stephen and I think early on, someone looked at us, and, Stephen and I have always been very honest about our life together. He is my best friend and the love of my life. And like I said, we've been married almost 37 years. We also got married very young, and there were so many things that we thought we knew about each other, but really didn't. And so it is no secret that he and I we always call it the preventative maintenance plan. We have always counseled in one way or the other, because we have wanted to make our marriage count and make our life count and do as many right things as we can. We are still a work in progress. And yet we knew, because of that, pretty early on, someone said, when you lose a child, the statistic is the sky high percentage of people who, just cannot work through it and end up divorced. And it's like, we looked at each other and we're like, we are not going to let that happen. We couldn't see how that would even be a possibility, because it would certainly draw you closer together. Yet, I would say a couple years into the journey of grief, you realize that you have worked so tirelessly on trying to help your children transition through this horrible thing, that you're left looking at your spouse going, gosh, I haven't really even tried to care well for you, and you're grieving differently than I grieve, and you might have a bad day when I'm not having a bad day, then I'm having a bad day when you're not. And it does get very, very tricky, and personalities grieve in different ways. And we had to really dig deep and begin to do some really, really hard counseling and some hard work to just to really begin to just lay it all out on the table and ask for help. And there are some great therapists, great counselors, great techniques, all of that, but it is God and God alone who heals and redeems.
Yes.
And yes, we have had amazingly smart, bright people who have helped us along the way, but just really, it's the reason I named my book Choosing to See, is because I had a choice to make. And it is an active, verb that I'm choosing it daily. I'm choosing to see that there is goodness in this gloriously hard journey that God has put us on with the loss of Maria. And we're not going to understand it this side of eternity.
On episode number 47, I spoke with Delphia Bruton, a domestic violence survivor. Things got so bad for her that her ex-husband almost took her life. She talks about her journey and how she got through that. And she talks about the catering company that she started to help domestic violence survivors. Take a listen.
Abuse, like we talked about, it starts off as the emotional part. Once they got you emotionally, they know they can do whatever they want to do to you physically, right? The signs are so clear. And the signs were clear then is what I did then was I covered it all with love, I said, I can love him through this. I can change him, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that's one thing that we as women do. We look at a man and we say, I can change this about them. And that's just never, ever going to happen. We're never going to change a grown individual. They have to do it themselves. But there are some telltale signs. For one, is control, and they may come in very subtle ways. They're not as obviously outspoken as they become later on in the relationship. But the very subtle things, like giving you a list of things to do for the day. I want you to do this 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. I want you to call me at this time each day. Or if not saying it out loud, but making sure that they call you at the same time, taking control of your day. Every hour of the day, they have to talk to you. They have to know where you are. They have to know who you're talking to, and things like that. So you want to make sure of those signs. Wanting just to be with you all the time, and you can never be apart. That's not healthy. That's not healthy. It's not healthy for married couples to be together all the time. It's not healthy for dating people to be together all the time and having to know every detail of their, of their operations. throughout that day. It's just not healthy. So those are some really good telltale signs that there's something wrong.
Yeah.
If he gets or he or she gets angry very quickly about little things, that's a very, very telltale sign. Another thing is that if you're on, dating, on a date, and you make a compliment, or not a compliment, but a remark saying, "Oh, that person bumped me," and then they say sorry, something like that, and they get really angry. They want to fight. That's an issue. That's a big issue. And things like that. Or someone compliments you, and then they want to fight. Something like that. So things like that you want to take a look out for. Also, what I found out was that cooking was validating for me. It helped me build my confidence. It made me get better and better and better each dish I prepared. And each dish I prepared, I was actually becoming better as a person because my confidence was building. And so in 2018, I decided to open the private chef company up into a catering company. So I closed the private chef company. We opened up a catering company. And here we are today, expanding to a restaurant to help women of abuse.
So if you're listening right now and you're trying to figure out how to turn your passion or past challenge into a meaningful purpose to help others, then consider booking a one-on-one call with me. I can help you tap into your gifts and your past so you can use those experiences to serve others. I will have an application in the show notes. Let's see if we're a good fit for working together. On episode number 58, Michelle Payette shares her journey of spending nearly 2 years incarcerated in the New York State prison system. While in prison and when she got out, she realized she wanted to make a positive change by ensuring parents stayed connected with their kids while serving their prison sentences. Take a listen.
And I said, I need help. And so I went to a church. At the same time, my boss had gotten caught by the Department of Taxation and Finance in New York State, who ended up doing an audit, and everything just kind of exploded all at one time. And I knew something was going to happen. And I just spilled my guts to this lady at this church. And she said, there's a saying that the truth shall set you free. You just need to stop lying and start telling the truth and pay the consequences. And she said, and trust God that he's going to handle everything for you and it will be okay. And I'll be here for you. And I just couldn't handle it anymore. I had lied to one person to please another person. Then I'd lie to that person to please another person. I was terrified of my boss and what he would do if he found out I was stealing. But at the same time, I'm stealing from him because I don't want to let my son down and lose our house, because that was the only stability we had. My mind was in such a bad place. I ended up leaving the employment. It was actually found by one of the girls that worked for me that I was stealing before he got audited. And I stayed. He let me stay. He said, you can pay me back. But that was before he realized that I had stopped helping him and cooking the books for him. And I had stopped filing our tax returns because I was struggling with what I was doing. I was just really confused. I don't know how I got through that time. I don't know how my kids survived that time, other than by divine intervention and it being God had a plan for all that mess for us. And that's come to realization now 10 years later. And I just started telling the truth. The tax investigators were involved. I went to court, but I admitted to the tax investigator that I stole the money. When he asked me that question, did you have permission? No, I didn't have permission. And so I did. I stole. And he sent me to prison. And I came home on April 27th, 2012. So he died 6 days before I was released. And but I did get a letter from a beautiful woman named Myra, who I stayed in touch with, and I volunteered for them when I came home. No one would hire me. So I volunteered, and I started that as a ministry at my church. I took that over. I saw the need of the families needing help with transportation to the prisons to visit their incarcerated parents.
On episode number 98, I spoke with Akila Augusta, a former nurse who struggled with hair loss at a very young age. This was devastating to her because she could not find a cure. So she invented her own hair loss product. Take a listen.
So it had been a couple of years, and I shaved my head off when I was 21, just completely shaved it off when my hair couldn't grow. I did not know that it was because of anemia. And that's what a lot of women don't know. Sometimes we know when it's postpartum hair loss, or if it's something stress related, like postpartum, or if something has happened, or if it's because of your chemo, or things like that. But a lot of times those underlying causes, like thyroid deficiencies, and even your medications and your birth control, people don't know that this could be the reason for your hair loss. So for me, it was a few things. It was the anemia. I've taken birth control before, and birth control affects me a lot. The hormonal birth controls like Depo-Provera and things like that. But when I realized it couldn't grow back, even after I shaved my head, even after I wasn't manipulating my hair, I went to a trichologist, a dermatologist. I went to different people to see if they could help me grow my hair back. Even that company, it's Bosley or something that helps men grow their hair back, went there too. And I just wasn't seeing any results. So, I just was like, well, maybe I should try a natural approach. And it worked. Worked for me, worked for a lot of other people.
So on episode number 104, I spoke with Grammy-nominated artist Chynna Phillips Baldwin. Now, Chynna has experienced complex trauma. And just to give you context, I'm going to share some of the traumatic things that Chynna has gone through in her life. So she was abducted and molested at the age of 12. She was groomed by a predator at the age of 14. She was raped on her 18th birthday. She saw her dad and his wife shooting up heroin. She had father abandonment issues, which led to drug and alcohol abuse. She's also talked openly about clinical depression, marital challenges, and her son's diagnosis with cancer. And that's not even all the things that she's gone through. She felt compelled to launch a Christian YouTube channel called California Preachin'. And here is where she talks about her past. She's still going through her own healing journey, but she's using her platform to help so many other women. Take a listen.
I always tell people on Cal Preach, when you climb the mountain and you get to the peak, you're not done. You've got to turn back around before you go down that mountain. And you've got to yell down and say, hey, you've got to extend a hand and get somebody else out of that deep, dark mire, because that's part of our responsibility. Makes me want to cry, but it's true. That's a part of our responsibility. If you know that type of darkness is to when you finally get out of it, to get to the peak and reach down and help somebody else get out of it.
On episode number 114, I spoke with Emily Spiegelmeier, who talks about how her husband's porn-filled infidelity wrecked their marriage. Together, they were able to find healing. She was able to forgive him. And now they have a business together and a podcast where they're helping other couples who have gone through a similar journey. Take a listen.
Since I was married 31 years when all of this happened, there's a lot of life before that. But basically, my husband and I had a really good marriage, I thought. We were very intentional about our marriage and our parenting. And, we were best friends. We did everything together. We got married when we were really young, and we were in church and loving God and learning about him and serving him all through our marriage. And so about 5 years ago, when he confessed to me that he had committed adultery and had a porn problem, I was shocked. It was something that I never thought I would ever hear come out of his mouth. And so that turned my world upside down. And a lot of crying, a lot of anger, a lot of grief and regret and confusion. All those things started to flood into my world. And it was a really hard journey, but he was all about repentance and recovery and reconciliation. which made it a lot easier for me to be able to come alongside and work on it with him, and to eventually forgive him, and, just let God give us a new marriage. He took what was broken, and he just made it all brand new. So that's it in a nutshell. There's a lot of details that go along with our story, which we talk about in our podcast. But really, after a long time of being married, I was just my feet were knocked out from under me with the news of infidelity. I just want to remind everyone that there's this promise from Romans 8:28 that I love. It says, "And we know that in all things God works for the good of those who love him, who have been called according to his purpose." So he has a purpose for each and every one of us. And we may not see that purpose very clearly right now, but if we are willing to stick close to him and follow what he says to do, he will reveal that to us, and we will be able to have that fulfillment of that purpose and that joy of being in God's plan, the plan he has had for us since we were conceived. And it's tough. It can be a tough road. There's a lot of circumstances that are very, very difficult to live through, but there's always hope with Jesus.
All right, so we've come to the end of another episode. My prayer is that you found hope and healing in these messages. If you did, would you do me a favor and share it with another mom who could also use this episode? As you know, my podcast is meant to be a blessing to mothers, so any support that you can give would be so appreciated. Until next time.